Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
I'm with Mr. Shivshankar Menon, former National Security Advisor and former Foreign Secretary during the horrific Mumbai attacks, but we'll come to that. Mr. Menon, welcome to ThePrint.
Thank you.
My first question to you, of course, is about the Pulwama attacks and the wake of the attacks, the strikes in Pakistan, in Balakot, outside Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. What is your take on this? What does this mean?
Well, you know, I had actually predicted this in my book in 2016, saying that Mumbai, we might have exercised restraint from any overt military response, but that any subsequent government, I think it was unlikely, and if there were another major terrorist incident, that it was unlikely that we could repeat what we had done in 2008.
So you were not surprised when this?
So I wasn't surprised, and after all, this government had done so-called surgical strikes in 2016.
Right.
When Uri happened. So I think it was natural to expect them to do something. And it's logical to hit Jaish, because they're the ones who committed it, and owned up to it immediately.
Right, exactly.
And I think also to raise the threshold by actually hitting them where they are, which in this case happened to be in Pakistan, rather than just Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
So is that a significant message, to hit outside?
That's a message. I think that we are willing to actually raise the level of deterrence, because after all, deterrence has broken down, so you need to restore that. But the rest of the commentary around it, frankly, amazes me. I mean, there's so much. Every day there's a new story, sources say this, sources say that.
Why does it amaze you? I mean, you've been in the thick of it.
This is sheer electoral politics. It has nothing to do with the reality of if you want to either change Pakistani behavior, because Pakistan, the state of Pakistan supports cross-border terrorism into India.
The state of Pakistan supports cross-border terrorism?
It does, because it immediately denies it, and it makes it possible for it to happen.
So when you say the state, what do you mean?
I mean that the government is complicit, and that the Pakistan Army and the ISI are involved in running it, training it, managing it, making it possible. So
the Jaish-e-Mohammed responsibility of Pulwama?
Well, these groups that attack us, they never attack the Pakistani government. Whether it's Lashkar, whether it's Jaish, I mean, they work with them, but they work against us, and they work against Afghanistan. There are other groups, all descendants of Jundullah, for instance, who work against Iran. In fact, it's amazing, on the same day you had all three of us, Iran, Afghanistan, India, alleging cross-border terrorism out of Pakistan.
So are you saying that...
That cannot happen across a border which is fenced, which is controlled, which is heavily militarized with us, unless the Pakistan Army is complicit. And the Pakistan Army is an instrument of the state, supposedly. It might be the owner of the state as well, but theoretically it's an instrument of state. So when I say the state of Pakistan is involved, it is. And I think there's no question, nobody in the world, except for Pakistanis, will deny it today.
So the Americans, the Russians,
everybody
the Chinese
knows it. Whether they choose to do something about it is different.
Do the Chinese know?
I'm sure they know. Which is why they work with precisely that state in order to try and control terrorists who go into Xinjiang and their territories.
So, but they're only willing to go thus far. They were supportive of India.
Each state will worry about their interests, unless they are attacked. Why should they worry? Now these groups like Lashkar, like Jaish, the ones that they have nurtured for so many years, they basically operate against you. Some of them operate in, or elements of them operate in Afghanistan as well. So, you know, they clearly have a purpose, but they are very careful not to attack other states.
Okay, so just to go back to your earlier point, which is that in a sense the airstrikes episode is over and that we've moved on.
What I'm saying is we don't seem as a society, as a media, as politicians to have moved on. But as far as its direct, immediate impact on what really matters, which is changing Pakistani behavior or degrading Jaish, I think that phase seems to be over for the present, but it's not over forever. I mean, today, the terrorists, for instance, you can't say that because of that terrorism is over or cross-border terrorism will stop. Or the behavior of the Pakistani state has changed fundamentally.
So you have you or have you not degraded the Pakistani establishment?
You have shown a willingness to hit Jaish wherever they are.
And that's a good thing?
That's a good thing. That you've established a principle. But where you take it from now depends on what happens in the future.
So if you say that
I'm not saying it's over, not at all, because I don't think that until the nature of Pakistan changes, cross-border terrorism is going to stop. After all, you've had it in one form or another since 1947.
Absolutely.
From the raiders in Kashmir.
Right.
So that is, it's structural to Pakistan.
So then if you're saying that you're not able to change the behavior of the Pakistani state...
No, I'm not. I'm saying it hasn't changed yet.
So have you been able to change it with these strikes?
No. No.
So then
but I don't think anyone is claiming that.
Okay.
I don't think. What you have done is you've tried to raise the level of deterrence and to deter future attacks by saying you will pay a higher cost in the future. Now, whether the trouble is that Pakistan, when you do this in public, the way we did it, the Pakistanis also then raise their level of threat by doing something they have not done before, which is to hit you across the line using their air force.
So if you haven't been able to change the behavior of the Pakistani state...
I think if you want to do that, if that's your goal, then you have to do many more things. You have to use a whole range of things.
Like what?
You have to do covert things, you have to do overt things, you have to do diplomatic things.
Right.
Military force, or the use of military force, no matter how calibrated and limited, or is really only one piece of your whole toolkit. And it has certain uses, but it can't do the whole job.
So what are the other things that India should do?
A set of things that you can do. Either you can incentivize, you can raise costs, and you can do it diplomatically, you can work with the rest, you can hit their financing, you can do all kinds of things.
So what has the Modi government been able to do these last 5 years on Pakistan?
Well, I think Pakistan policy has not been a great success because they have veered from one extreme to another, including, dropping in on a wedding and inviting them to the swearing in, but then saying, I will not talk as long as terrorism goes on. By saying that, you've actually given the initiative to the terrorists.
How have you done that?
Because the terrorists can determine whether you talk or not. Whether you talk or not after that is no longer in your hands. You've said, I won't talk if there's terrorism. So every time a terrorist wants to stop you talking, he just has to lob a grenade.
Okay, so let's go back, Prime Minister.
So it seems to me that you've also said, I won't talk, I won't trade, I won't do this, I won't allow travel, I don't give visas to even ordinary people. Once you start doing that, you've just closed your options one by one. And you've actually taken away the tools that you normally use to induce behavior on the other side. After all, you don't have a quarrel with all of Pakistan.
Right, and which is what...
What's your quarrel with Pakistani civil society, or with most of the civilian politicians, or with Pakistani business? That's not your quarrel is with those who actually do you harm. Pakistan Army, ISI, the jihadi tanzeems, and so on.
So what should
So deal with those, isolate those and oppose those, and deal with those separately from what you do with the others. And I think that's really the way forward.
So should the Modi government talk to Pakistan?
No, you don't talk to the people who are hurting you, but you at least deal with the others. I mean, I don't see why you stop ordinary people from traveling.
Right.
Why do you stop civil society who has a voice, no matter how weak and powerless they may be in your estimation, but they do have a voice. And why can't you encourage voices who speak for reason, who speak for better Pakistani behavior with India? I think that's normal.
So what is your view then of the Modi government's Pakistan policy? Is it a failure?
Yes, I don't think it's been a success.
Would you call it a failure?
I think unless their goal was to achieve this situation where frankly we have no initiative, where Pakistan actually has managed to look almost statesmanlike. Despite actually promoting cross-border terrorism, not changing its behavior, doing all these things. And still, they managed to be the ones who claim to speak for peace. I find that incredible.
But how are you saying that they're doing that? Are you saying because of their response to the Indian airstrikes?
Well, partly because they returned the pilot very quickly.
Yes.
And
that was a good thing.
Also because they have consistently said, we're ready to talk. We're ready to discuss everything.
So in a sense, they have the upper hand.
Not that they have the upper hand, no.
Okay.
Because this is just appearance. I mean, we know what they're doing.
Right.
If you want to change what they're doing, you need to do a whole range of things. Not just say, I won't talk.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of the problem. The other problem, I think, with the Modi government's period and what they've done is they have certainly, opinion in Kashmir is much more alienated today than it has been for a very long time.
Right.
And given that situation, that I think encourages Pakistan to try and make more trouble.
How does it do that?
Well, they think that they have an opportunity here. They've misread Kashmir consistently. I mean, Ayub misread it in 65 when he sent in infiltrators. They've consistently, in 47, 48, they thought by sending raiders, the Kashmiri populace would be up in arms against India and would want to join Pakistan. I think they're still misreading Kashmir. It's not my feeling, my impression that Kashmiris want to join Pakistan at all.
Right.
They might be unhappy with what they think the central government in Delhi.
In recent memory, they're more alienated than
But they are alienated today, and I think there is a need to at least reach out politically and to try and deal with this issue.
But the Modi government was in a coalition with the PDP for nearly 3 years.
But we haven't seen very much results of this. In fact, why have we had to impose governor's rule? Because the political process has broken down. So my own take is therefore that actually encourages Pakistani obduracy.
Okay.
And these attempts.
So they feed in on the alienation.
They think that they have alienation they can work with, therefore they try and make more trouble, therefore they try and create more incidents.
But the fact that
and the ceasefire is broken down. So in other words, deterrence on the line is also not working, local deterrence. So for me, these are all signs actually of a policy that really needs to be looked at again very carefully. And
Delhi's Kashmir policy.
Exactly.
The fact that there was a Kashmiri boy who blew himself up and who had the suicide car bomb attack in Pulwama.
That's not the first time in history, and you can always find an individual who's alienated.
It is rare though, because the last time it happened
it is rare. It is rare, but the fact is that for me, just because one boy happened to be Kashmiri or not, that doesn't represent. I think it's a general situation which actually encourages Pakistani behavior. The fact that they could find one and do it, I mean that's what they try and do.
Right. So if Modi's Pakistan policy, in your words, is not a success, the airstrikes in Pakistan outside POK.
I think the airstrikes was something that was predictable, probably necessary. I don't know enough. I'm not in the loop. I don't look at the data, at the intelligence and the information, but it seems to me necessary. But as I said, it's not sufficient.
Right.
To achieve your goals. And I think you have to see it in the context of the broader. But what worries me is the kind of discussion that we see today.
Which is about?
It's made it purely a political, political electoral issue. And this huge argument about numbers and...
Numbers of people dead.
I mean, does 300 make it a success, 10 makes it a failure? That's rubbish. You don't measure success or failure by the number of people you kill. You measure it by the outcomes you create. And this is the use of force to create an outcome, not to...
But why are you disturbed, Mr. Menon, after all?
I'm disturbed because it shows how low the level of literacy on these issues is. And I don't mean, that you can't read or write, but it's just that obviously people don't think about these issues, which maybe is a good sign.
So are you talking about the numbers of, say, 350 dead?
No, when I see the media going wild about these stories, and every day there's a new story. So how can you believe any of these stories?
And
all attributed to all these kinds of stories. I mean, everybody is an armchair general and is an expert on how bombs work and what happens and which bomb to use. I mean, frankly, I find that ridiculous. These things are best left to the professionals.
Right.
And the Air Force has been very careful in what they say. You look at the Air Force chief. That's the truth, and go by that rather than by this wild speculation that we see and the warmongering that I've heard on the TV, for instance. So I find that very disturbing. Because it means that the media, at least, thinks there's a market for this, that is not a good thought.
But do you think that the Modi government could have handled this better in terms of perception internationally?
As I said, I'm out of the loop. I've been out of government 5 years now.
Right.
I cannot tell you what they should have done, because if you knew all the facts, then yes, perhaps you could say, do this, do that. But I'm not going to sit here and second-guess government.
Okay. You were Foreign Secretary during the 2008 Mumbai strikes. Tell us what happened then. What was the crisis? I know, but tell our viewers a little bit about what was.
Read the book.
Okay, we will read the book, and viewers, please read Mr. Menon's book. It's called Choices, and it's a very slim book, but please do read it.
No, because what I tried to do there was to describe the situation, to say what were the options. Think of, supposing we had used overt military force,
Yes.
what would have happened?
Right.
We chose not to, and what actually happened, and which of the two, if you compare, because my own initial reaction in 2008 was we should hit them. Hit Lashkar, either in POK or certainly wherever they were. Because
Revenge or retaliation.
not just revenge, it would have been emotionally satisfying, but also to prevent further attacks. Because they hadn't just trained those 10 people who came.
Yes.
They had trained something like 25 people, actually, at the same time, simultaneously. So,
For Mumbai.
for similar attacks, for commando-style attacks like that.
You had that information.
We knew that. We knew that.
You knew that before the Mumbai attacks?
We knew it from Kasab. And we had Kasab very soon. But the point is,
So
in
Kasab
order,
said that
in
they-
any case,
Yeah.
in order to prevent further such attacks,
Yes.
and you needed to raise the deterrence. So my first reaction was, you need to do something military and so on. But then later I realized, and when you thought it through, and that's what I argue in the chapter, that given the time, circumstances, and that particular moment, it probably made sense not to react overtly militarily. You did other things,
Right.
but not overtly militarily.
What did you do?
Many things, including you managed to get the people who did the money, bought the equipment, you managed to get people from abroad, all kinds of things. You did a fair amount. And most important, you did manage to isolate Pakistan and to make sure that there were no clearly attributable attacks from Pakistan for a few years after that.
Right. And Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who was Prime Minister at the time, must have been a lot of anger in the Congress party across the country. There was a lot of
That you
anger.
have to talk to him about the party. But it seems to me, so in hindsight, it seems to me it was right. But I also said in Choices that those circumstances will never be repeated. And if there were another major terrorist attack, India would not react the same way.
So is it fair to compare Pulwama with Mumbai?
No, I don't think so. It's a different time, different place. Pakistan is in a very different situation. The world is very different from what it was then. Our capacities are very different today.
But Pakistan seems to be weaker in many ways, at least economically.
They're weaker economically, but they're not as diplomatically isolated as they were in 2008. If you look at the levels of support that they get from China, from Saudi Arabia, are much higher. The US might be more negative about Pakistan today now that she's withdrawing from Afghanistan.
Right.
Her need for Pakistan is down. But she still gets much more play. The Russians, for instance, are working with Pakistan, were selling them
Yes,
weapons,
absolutely.
which in 2008
And have offered mediation,
offered mediation.
strangely.
Chinese have also said we're willing to help. But I don't think, so I'm not sure that they're as diplomatically isolated as they were then. They need money, yes, but many of their friends have money.
So let's talk a little bit about Modi's China policy. What do you make of that?
I think that's been a relative success.
Okay.
Because basically he's done what previous governments of India did,
Which is?
to discuss the difficult issues, but to develop the rest of the relationship and not to let the boundary and the difficult issues prevent the development of the rest of the relationship. And that is fundamentally what every government of India has done since the Rajiv Gandhi visit in
Right.
1988.
Yes.
And that both India and China, I think both have other fish to fry.
Yes.
They have other things, internal developments, coping with the world economy, coping with the changes in American policy. There's a huge shift with Trump, with what's happening. And that's a big shift for us and for China. So given that, I think both India and China, therefore, knowing they have other things to do, have managed the relationship reasonably well.
So explain to me about the Masood Azhar question. We've been very keen on blacklisting him.
I'm not sure why we think it's so important. Even if he were listed tomorrow, you think Jaish would stop what it's doing?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, how long has Hafiz Saeed been listed? And what happened?
For a few years. And
For several years,
Yes.
for more than a decade.
Right.
It doesn't change Lashkar's, or they might change their name, but it doesn't change their behavior.
So should you be putting so much diplomatic capital into the...
This is what I don't understand about the government.
Right.
They put in a tremendous effort on this,
Yeah.
on NSG membership, which frankly you don't need.
Yes.
You have an exemption, you can do everything that a member can do. So why are you so bothered about the membership? You can cooperate with everyone. You have a special dispensation in your favor.
On the NSG.
On the NSG. So I'm not sure why we attribute so much importance to these things.
But on Masood Azhar, what do you think it's about? What is this sort of, is it like a bloodlust?
No, it seems to have become a big prestige issue. But I'm not sure why. I mean, so you put his name on a list, so what? Nothing's going to change if you get his name on the list.
But why
the UN is not going to march in and stop Jash from doing anything. So you have to deal with this problem yourself. You know this. You've known it at Mumbai, you've known it from 1993, you've known it from Khalistan. Your problems you have to deal with. Nobody else is going to fix it for you. It's a distraction to think that putting somebody's name on a list or not. Now, when you say this is a very important issue for me, you've effectively given other people a handle. And he'll say, okay, pay me a price if you want it.
Like China.
And that's, I think, where we are. They've said, yeah, talk to us, tell us, explain to us.
What do they want?
They haven't said.
What do you think? You know China really well.
I think they know what it's worth. And they can't believe it that you've made such a fuss out of this. And I still don't understand why Indians think this matters.
So what do you think they would want?
Who?
The Chinese, in exchange for Masood Azhar.
Let them speak for themselves. Frankly, it's not worth anything. So I don't think you should pay any prices for it.
So would it be trade? Would it be a conversation on territory?
What happens in a market when you bargain? You get it for the best price you can, right? If you're buying. If you're selling, you charge as much as you can get for it. Right now, the Chinese are selling. So they'll see what they can get out of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to know what they're...
So Masood, the ban on the listing of Masood Azhar is
it's a meaningless thing. I mean, it really, how does it change anything? I've never understood this. And why attach India's prestige to this?
So let's talk about Modi's neighborhood policy. 5 years are over, elections are around the corner.
Yeah.
Simply, how would you describe it?
I think the next government, whoever it is, will have to do a lot of work to repair our relationships in the neighborhood.
It's been pretty destroyed.
Well, I don't think our relationship with Nepal is where it should be. If the Nepalese are choosing a Chinese gauge for their railways, for instance, when all their natural linkages are south with our railways, with us, whether it's people, whether it's trade, whether it's education, all of those things, then I think there is some work to be done there.
But you have a roti
on the issues that really matter in the neighborhood. Rohingyas, for instance, which divides two of your neighbors, two friends.
Bangladesh, Myanmar.
And Myanmar. I think those are the kinds of issues where you should be contributing to at least moving it towards a solution. These are both your friends, and they're difficult issues. And this is your neighborhood. You should be in there helping them.
Right.
Rather than picking one side and picking another. And also, I think what's happened is policies in the Northeast, and like the Citizenship Act, for instance, or the NRC, and the expulsion of people and so on. I think that's actually complicated your relationship with the neighbors.
So the domestic politics has complicated.
Has actually complicated that. And that, I think, is true across the board. That in a sense, domestic politics is now intruding much more into your foreign policy, whether it's with Pakistan, whether it's with Nepal, whether it's with the Northeast and with Bangladesh, Myanmar, for instance. And that, I think, is not a very good phenomenon.
But you could have actually used it to sort of cement the relationship, right? With trade, with people to people.
People to people, with integrating the subcontinent economically. I mean, that's where you should be, because you need a peaceful periphery. This is your home.
But you've turned it on its head.
And we actually have. That's unfortunate. You see, and the other thing is there is a risk, especially the way I find we present policy these days in the media and other places. It's as though we start judging, we have friends, so-and-so is pro-Indian, so-and-so is anti-Indian. These things worry me. You know, in Sri Lanka, everybody should be your friend.
Right. You don't think they are?
I don't think you should be. I think they would like to be. But I think they also need to be sure that you are. After all, you've shed blood for the unity of Sri Lanka.
That's right.
You've lost soldiers. You have an interest in Sri Lanka succeeding as a unified state within which all the communities can live in peace. And I think that somehow we seem to have lost that that position.
So how would you...
And part of it, I think, is this extreme sensitivity to anything anyone does with China. But China is a fact of life in our neighborhood. It's a fact of life in the world today.
So should you care as much what the Chinese are doing in your neighborhood?
It means that if the Chinese are doing more, and if there's something that affects your security or you directly, yes. But not everything they do is negative. And you need to step up your game. You need to step up and do more in your own neighborhood, because they matter to you. A peaceful periphery matters to your ability to meet your own interests. So
in one word, how would you describe Modi's foreign policy?
I think it's a lost 5 years, because there were big changes in the world. The world economy has changed completely from what it was before, and we have no foreign economic policy worth the name. I mean, we are reviewing FTAs still. We're not sure whether we want to be in RCEP, on what terms. We're not ready to engage with the world in foreign economic terms. The US policy has shifted fundamentally under Trump, and the whole China-US dynamic has changed. It's in a new phase. China itself is changing. And what Xi Jinping has done is really quite a change in the way China has run and the way China behaves on the international stage. Belt and Road, you have a whole series of things. These are big changes going on around you.
A quick last question on the Dalai Lama.
You have not reacted to any of them. To the extent, to a great extent, the Modi foreign policy has been a continuation of previous foreign policy.
Right.
Where past things worked and will keep working, their foreign policy has worked. But they haven't adjusted to change, and they've missed the opportunities that came up.
A quick last question on the Dalai Lama. How's the Modi government, what do you think the Modi government's policy on him has been?
They have one?
I'm asking you.
I don't know. I don't know what their policy is, frankly.
Okay, so with the Karmapa...
I'm not sure what their policy is on that.
Right. Mr. Menon, thank you so much for speaking to The Print.
Thanks a lot.
I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there, but continue to watch The Print's YouTube channel. It's live and buzzing. This is Jyoti Malhotra.